It's also a fantastic crowd for this first Resiliency Roundtable, the first of 10, which I will talk a little bit more about in a few minutes. But I'm Sean O'Rourke. I'm the Director of Stormwater and Resiliency at the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank, but also have the role of the state's Chief Resiliency Officer. As of about a week and a half ago, as the Governor put forth great climate leadership by signing an executive order launching a statewide climate strategic action strategy. And what that has allowed us to do is to really generate data and input from across the state. And tonight is really that first piece of information. And we recognize that this is not the first bit of input that we're receiving on climate resiliency efforts. This is on the shoulders of a lot of work that has already been done. So this process is really just about getting a broad perspective from across the state, from the coast to the upland and everything in between. First, I want to thank our host tonight, Save the Bay, and introduce Topher Hamblett, who to maybe say a few words about Save the Bay, and wanted to just say thanks so much for playing this critical role tonight.
Thanks, Sean. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Save the Bay. You are sitting on a brownfield site. This used to be a landfill back in the day, and it is now a redeveloped landfill in a green building, very energy efficient. It's many things besides that too. It's also all this land outside here is open to the public sun up to sundown, and I would say it's by far the best waterfront view in Providence, bar none. Kurt Spalding is the former director of Save the Bay. You can thank him for us being here today. So you're about to launch into some very serious work. Just from Save the Bay's perspective, we spend a lot of time on climate, a lot of time and energy on climate adaptation, habitat, water quality, public access, things like that. The work you're about to engage in is very important. It's really important that the state finally develop a long-term vision and strategy for climate resilience, and I hope that this meeting will indeed build upon the work that's been done already and drive the state towards that goal. It's imperative that as a state we do that. So I hope we have a great meeting tonight, and back to you. Right.
Thank you, Topher. So the agenda. We have an absolutely jam-packed agenda, and that's really why I wanted to make sure that we got started right away. We just heard from Topher. We're going to hear from Parag Agarwal from the Department of Planning, statewide planning, in a little bit later. From the EC4's perspective, they've really been absolutely a critical partner in making sure that this work move forward, and we're going to be kind of working in lockstep with them over the next 9 months as we develop this strategy. I'm going to give a brief overview of the statewide climate resiliency action strategy, what we're trying to achieve, how we arrived here, and where we're going. The goals and logistics for today, which is going to be intense, but I think everyone here is up for it. We're going to have some breakout sessions, some lightning rounds, and then we're going to hear from the facilitators about what we heard. And then we're going to take all that information and package it and be sending it back out to you for your feedback afterwards. So, as I mentioned, about a week and a half ago, Governor Raimondo really put forth some really terrific leadership by signing that executive order for a statewide climate resiliency action strategy and naming a chief resiliency officer. And I thought that this quote was really important. And it talks about not that we've done a lot of planning, but it's about what we need to now do with that planning, right? And so this action strategy is all about action. It's about doing. It's about looking for the investments that we can make as a state to help us be better prepared in the face of a new climate reality. And that's absolutely critical. And so all the work we're going to be doing tonight is about mapping those critical assets. What are the things here in this upper Narragansett Bay watershed that are absolutely critical that we prepare for a changing climate? And that's natural assets, that's built assets, that's critical social assets as well. And we'll dive into that in a few minutes. As I mentioned earlier, this work is not starting new. This is building upon all of the work that's been done. We're really standing on the shoulders of the amazing amount of research and planning and data collection that's been done, everything from DEM with their wastewater treatment facilities to the fantastic new report that came out called Watershed Counts, to the work that Trust for Public Land is doing on mapping across urban heat islands and stormwater management issues and coastal inundation. There has really been an amazing amount of work done. And this process is about collecting and elevating all of that work so we can actually take that work and put it into action. So the statewide action strategy has 3 major goals. And those 3 goals are to identify and prioritize resiliency actions and investments, as I mentioned, that are directly connected with communities across the state. Not just on the coast, not just upland, but everywhere in between. We want to integrate the planning and best practices that have already been done, take all that work and actually place that into an action strategy that builds upon that planning, and then really positions Rhode Island as a leader in resiliency action and creates a better prepared ocean state. And I think the turnout tonight on really short notice, we recognize we put the invite out a week ago, and to be able to have an audience like this really shows the dedication and work that has been done across the state, and everyone here is, I think, fully bought in. It's going to take, I usually say it takes a village, but really is absolutely going to take the whole state. So over the next 9 months, we have a large task on our hands, and this isn't the Chief Resilience Officer's task. This isn't the EC4's task. This is really all of our task. And we're going to be leading this effort, and wanted to show how we're going to get to a strategy release on July 1st of next year. The roundtables are going to be across the state over the next month and a half to 2 months, probably finishing up the middle of November. We're going to identify critical themes and priorities that we heard from all 10. We're going to develop expert-led working groups from across all of the agencies, organizations, folks who have really been diving into this work deeply for a pretty long time. They're going to help us put the meat on those priorities. We're going to have another round of outreach to come back to everybody who's been engaged in this process. Say, are we hearing you right? Is this resonating? Is this matching the local issues that you're seeing? And also launch an executive summary for public comment. And then have the final strategy development over the last month and a half or so, really to kind of bring it across the finish line. And when I say finish line, it's kind of like a green infrastructure project, right? When you cut the ribbon, to say, oh, that was great, we really nailed it. No, this is a matter of now we have to actually figure out how this thing works. What's the maintenance? What's the further implementation of this work? And so, while July 1st will really prioritize what critical investments need to make now, this is going to be ongoing work into the future about how we build on those early priorities to really create an overall better prepared ocean state. So the resiliency roundtables that are going to be going on across the state, we've divided the state up into loosely 10 different geographies. And we've had a lot of conversation about whether these are the right lines or not. Many people kind of span boundaries. They live in one, they work in another, and so on. We found that this sort of generally captured the essence of regions around the state. So the first one here is tonight at Save the Bay, and really can't thank Save the Bay enough for being our flagship host here on night number 1. Our second one is going to be at Audubon Society, co-hosted by the Blackstone Valley Tourism Council on October 12th. Followed up right on its heels by the Coastal Resource Center down in Narragansett. And then we have the Wood-Pawcatuck Watershed Association out here in Hopkinton on October 18th. And then on October 26th, Aquidneck Island, the number 5 region and the surrounding towns, we're going to be hosting a roundtable out there. And the other dates are quickly coming on their heels, so stay tuned. The roundtable goals, there's 4 key goals. There's going to be other ones that are going to subset, but 4 key goals that I want everyone to kind of make sure we're all on the same page, because this is going to be critical in understanding the input that we're looking for from you for tonight. The first one is that we want to make sure we have consistent data from across the entire state. And if I flip back, we're going to be hosting a very similar meeting in all 10 of these geographies. And while we understand that we're going to learn a few things from meeting 1 to meeting 5 to meeting 10, there's going to be a little adaptive management. We recognize that the data that we're looking to collect is going to be consistent. We want to identify what are those key local assets and resources across 3 themes. And those 3 themes are community health and equity, infrastructure and environment, and economic development. And I'll define these in just another minute. We want to look for who are the key stakeholders, what is the critical data, And then what are the studies that have already been done that we aren't aware of yet, that maybe have been done by local community organizations or others that really haven't been elevated to the statewide level that we want to make sure that we capture. And that data is going to be critical as we come back around on that second level of outreach. And then finally, what are some other local projects that are really teed up? We want to make sure that we can show some early wins. We can put projects underneath this strategy. I know there are projects that just need a nudge in terms of funding or just need a nudge in terms of design expertise. Are there projects that are just ready to go? We want to hear about those as well so that we maybe can accelerate those through this process. So the three themes for tonight, and there's going to be 3 breakout conversations that are going to happen concurrently. And I'll go through the logistics in a minute. Community health and equity, we've defined that, and these are all broad, and they're broad for a reason, and your facilitators will help you kind of dig in and find the nuance in each of these. So community health and equity is resources, facilities, and organizations that ensure the well-being of all residents. Really, it's about people from all over the state. Infrastructure and environment are what are the systems, facilities, and organizations that provide critical built and ecological services to residents. And finally, economic development. Resources, facilities, and organizations that enable businesses to thrive. So these are going to be the 3 themes that we're going to be mapping assets on over the course of the next hour and a half. The 3 assets, as I mentioned, natural assets, built assets, and social assets. I put a few examples just to kind of stimulate the group to make sure that we are on the same page by what we mean by each of these assets. And we really want, this is not a kind of putting the answers to the test. This is to hope that everyone kind of uses these as examples and then can find their own examples from the way that they're looking at resiliency through the lens of their own community. So these are the 3 assets we're mapping. And the 4th one is kind of an add-on that we want to make sure that we're capturing as well. And those, what are the needs and resources that are critical to ensuring that the assets that we noted become resilient? Is that we want to make sure that we have sustainable funding and financing? Is that there's a limited municipal staffing? We want to make sure that we're tracking metrics. Is there limited expertise? Those are the needs and resources that are critical to making sure that these assets become resilient. And your facilitators will help you walk through these. So how are we going to do this? It sounds like a lot, and it is, but we feel like we've got the right group here. So there's going to be breakout sessions. It's going to be 3 groups. We're going to divide all of you into 3 groups. We're going to try and make it as even as possible. Everyone will have a chance to go to all 3 groups. There's going to be 3 15-minute sessions. So we're going to have 1 15-minute session. Everyone's then going to rotate, and then we'll rotate again. Everyone rotates through each theme by staying in their same group. Facilitators will remain at the theme, right? So there's consistency. You're going to be building upon the input that the group before you provided. And most importantly, we want everyone to be bold and honest and put forth things that are really creative and provocative and make us think, okay? After we're done with those breakout sessions, we're going to prioritize those list of assets. So we'll reconvene in this room, and everyone will have the opportunity to vote based on dots on all of the assets that they put up so that we can then have the facilitators report out to all of us about what were the critical aspects, what were the critical assets that each of them heard. So this is going to be a lot, but we recognize that I think this is the data that we want to make sure that we're looking at, and the strategy is all focused on adaptation and better preparing our state. And we think that looking at through all of this work through an asset mapping process is really going to be critical. So who are our facilitators? For community health and equity, we have Julia Gold, right over there. She is the Chief of Sustainability, Autonomous Vehicles, and Innovation at RIDOC. One of the most exciting titles in all the state government. Love it. We have Infrastructure and Environment, facilitated by Liz Stone, who's focused on policy and programs at RIDEM and works very closely with the EC4. And then we have Economic Development from Paul Giuseppe, who's the Assistant Chief from Rhode Island Statewide Planning. And where is Paul? There he is, there's Paul. Great, so those are going to be your 3 expert facilitators tonight. Lean on them for kind of descriptions and definitions and additional information of what the information that we're looking to achieve is tonight. So at this point, I can take 1 or 2 questions, and then we're going to break out into a series of 3 groups. So any larger framing questions about the nuts and bolts? Yeah, please.
Yeah, please. Paul Rosselli from the Borough of Land Trust. Just curious, you mentioned earlier about having consistent data.
Correct.
Can you explain what that means a little bit? How do you get consistent data from a place like Block Island and a place like where I live in Harlem?
Yeah, great question. That's a great clarifying question. So we're not looking for the data that we receive to be consistent, but the process in which we look to generate that data is consistent. So we imagine that the data and the assets that we generate from here in the Upper Narragansett Bay are likely going to be different from Block Island and Burleville. And that's what we're looking for, the different geographic perspective. But the process in which we're mapping those assets is going to be consistent throughout. Does that clarify?
That works. Thank you.
Yep. Any other clarifying questions on the process?